Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the CEO of Disney, Bob Iger, and his tips for being a successful leader. I'm Keith, and I'm a high school boarding student studying in the USA, and I'm passionate about how we can live intentional, fulfilling, and productive lives. So if you're in high school, many of the tips that I'm about to show you are applicable in your club activities, leadership activities, sports, whatever it is that you're doing. And it's good to get started early so that you can turn these tips into good habits in the future. If you're already outside of high school, then these tips are even more applicable to you now. Let's go over a brief summary of Bob Iger's life so that we get a good sense of who he is and what he's done in terms of the leadership department. So Bob Iger started off as a TV weatherman for the sports division of ABC Entertainment. As he worked harder, he eventually became the head of ABC, and at that time Disney bought ABC, and that's how he ended up being incorporated into the Disney Entertainment. And during his time as CEO, Bob Iger was the one who bought Pixar Animations from Steve Jobs and the Marvel Studios. So obviously we get a sense that he's contributed to a lot of Disney's success. With that said, let's get into the first tip, which is use your time effectively. So obviously, as the CEO of Disney, Bob Iger has very little time to do anything, but he divides his time into three categories. It's work, leisure, or sleep, and he can usually only get two of those in a single day. But the one thing that he never skips out on is this thing he calls stillness. The reason why Bob Iger never skips out on stillness is because he believes it's essential to seeing the bigger picture of the CEO company or whatever deal he's making. And he also believes that it's essential for creative out-of-the-box problem solving. So what he does is that he wakes up at 4:15 a.m. every morning and does some exercise in solitude, and this is his stillness period. While exercising, he allows his mind to wander, thinking about the different things that he might have to encounter later today and just getting himself ready in the right mindset. Now obviously most of us don't have to wake up at 4:15 a.m., but we can still apply some of his principles into our own life, because if Bob Iger is prioritizing stillness, then I think it's a good sign that we should be too. For example, you could spend some time meditating, even 5 to 10 minutes in the morning, or go on an evening walk alone in the woods without your phone. Apart from the stillness part, he also recommends that at the end of every day, you write down a list of everything that you've accomplished, no matter how small it may be, and this will give you a sense of satisfaction for closing off the day and allowing yourself to appreciate what you've done. Because oftentimes when you're running around or you're too busy to reflect in the moment, reflection at night is probably a good way to remind yourself of all the things that you've done and prepare yourself for the next day. Another tip is focusing and priorities. Bob Iger recommends that you have 3 priorities that you're working on in the moment. Any more than 3 priorities at a time, he believes, will make you less efficient and unable to do the tasks that you're working on well. For example, his 3 priorities are: 1. Invest most of Disney's capital in high quality branded content. 2. Use tech to create more compelling stories and reach more people around the world. And 3. Expand to international markets. Clarifying your professional or personal priorities is essential when you have to stay on top of your work at all times. Bob Iger can't go around explaining his company's vision haphazardly to anyone who asked him. He has to have clear priorities that he can communicate to people so that they know what the company Disney is working towards. And while in our personal or professional lives we may never reach the scale that Bob Iger has, it's always good to have these priorities written down so that we know what we're working towards at all times and we never get confused when we're influenced by other people. So you may not know this about Bob Iger, but he was actually the one who greenlighted Captain Marvel and Black Panther to become movies. The New York team thought that they should stick to the tried and true method, which is just to have a white main character save a woman or some stereotype like that. But instead, Bob was thinking out of the box, and he thought that this was the chance to get into this market, and it turned out that these 2 movies both did really good. And the lesson that Bob takes from this is that you can't let people tell you what they want. want, sometimes you have to anticipate what they want. In other words, what happened in the past isn't always a good indicator of what happens in the future. This lesson has a number of implications for you, whether you're making a fundraiser for your school or you're planning out something huge for your company. The point is to try and understand the consumers or the people you're working with, get into their shoes, go outside and experience what they want, and trying to understand your target audience will allow you to extrapolate from what you've experienced to create products or ideas that they might not think they needed in the first place. Another important part of leadership is calculated risk taking. And an example of this from Bob's time as a CEO is when he tried to buy 21st Century Fox. First, he listed out the benefits. Number one, it would enrich Disney's pre-existing library of content by bringing brands like National Geographic and The Simpsons into the mix. Two, it would increase Disney's capacity for content creation by getting 21st Century Fox's infrastructure and creative teams. And three, he would get access to 21st Century Fox's place in the international markets like Europe, India, and Southeast Asia. Now, if you look carefully, those three benefits that he gets from 21st Century Fox all align with the priorities he said that I mentioned previously as well. And this is one of the ways that you can make sure that the risk that you're taking is calculated, because if it does turn out to be true, the purchase of this company for Bob will directly contribute to his goals and priorities in Disney. And now the last tip from Bob Iger, it isn't really a tip, but it's just 5 criteria that he defined as good leadership. So number one is the role of humor, the ability to laugh at yourself or to make the atmosphere in the workplace lighter. Number two is to be authentic, and this comes in 2 parts. First, you have to be candid, which means that you own up to the mistakes you make, and the second part is you have to be optimistic, in that in owning up to your mistakes, you look for people who can help fix that problem for you and you work with them to try and improve the situation. Number 3 is to foster curiosity, whether it be exploring in a museum or exploring outside, going down an internet rabbit hole. Having these kinds of moments where you can let your curiosity flourish in an academic or work-related environment is also essential to innovation. Number 4 is to be decisive. Obviously, you can take calculated risks and weigh the pros and cons, but sometimes the decisions that you make aren't always the right ones. And in that case, you have to be decisive and know when to admit defeat, pivot as soon as possible towards the right solution. And the last criteria that you should look out for is projecting optimism. There's a quote that says, "It's incredibly important to infuse some level of optimism into about just everything. When in a tough situation, learn to frame it as a learning experience and create plans that guarantee growth." Alright guys, that's the end of this video. If you found any of this helpful, please consider subscribing or liking, and I'll see you later.